I'm Marianne Holt, 50 years old, and I spent my whole life earning a place my own father swore I would never stand. For years I chased one word from him, proud, and never heard it, while I flew off carrier decks and climbed through command after command. But when a young sailor shooed me off the flight deck of my own flagship, not knowing I was about to take command of the entire strike group, that one moment cracked open everything I had carried since I was a girl. Have you ever been dismissed by someone whose approval you spent your whole life chasing? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you are tuning in from. And if you have ever had to stand quietly in the truth of who you are after being underestimated, hit that like button and subscribe. My father could make the word deck sound like a cathedral. He would say it low, with weight, the way other men said the name of a town they had been born in and never really left. I learned the word before I learned to ride a bike. I learned the names of the colored jerseys, the meaning of the hand signals, the difference between a foul deck and a clear one. All of it from a kitchen table in a small house near the naval station, while a man in a sleeveless undershirt ironed creases into khaki that already had creases. Russell Holt was a boatswain's mate when I was small and a master chief by the time I was old enough to understand what that meant. 30 years on carrier flight decks, 30 years of steel and salt and jet wash, of waving aircraft into the wires and out of the catapults, of standing in a place where a single wrong step would erase a person from the world. He loved that place the way some men love a religion, and he spoke about it with the same mixture of reverence and fear. The deck gives, he would say. The deck takes. And then he would look at me, his only daughter, and say the part that took me 37 years to understand. He never once told me he was proud of me. He told me to be careful, which in his language was supposed to be the same thing, and which felt, for most of my life, like the opposite of it. When I was 9 years old, he taught me to tie a bowline. We sat on the back step with a length of stiff line he had brought home, and he showed me the rabbit coming out of the hole and around the tree and back down again, and when I got it right on the 4th try, he did not smile. But he held the knot up to the porch light and turned it once. And that turning was the whole of his approval. I would spend decades chasing that turn of the wrist. I did not know it then. You rarely know what you are chasing until you are most of the way there. We did not have much money, but we had the Navy, which in our house was the same as having everything. My father's pay was modest, and his pride in the work was bottomless, and somewhere in my childhood, the two things fused, so that I grew up understanding that the most valuable thing a person could own was not a house or a car, but a place in the work that mattered. He would come home smelling of jet fuel and brine, his hands cracked, his hearing already going from years on the deck without the protection they give sailors now, and he would sit at that kitchen table and tell us about the day in the flat, factual way of a man who does not think of himself as telling stories. A bird that bolted 3 times before it trapped. A green shirt who saved a man's life by tackling him clear of an intake. The weather over the strait. I drank all of it. I did not understand as a child that I was being raised at the edge of a world I was simultaneously being told I could never enter. I only understood that my father was the most certain man I had ever met, and that his certainty had a shape and that the shape did not include me. My brother Dennis is 3 years older than me. When Dennis announced at 16 that he was going to enlist, my father set down his fork and nodded, once, and the table went warm with something I did not have a word for yet. Pride. It was pride. Dennis did one enlistment and got out and sold cars after that, and my father never stopped being proud of those 4 years. Because Dennis had stood on the deck, even briefly, and that was the thing that counted in our house. That was the coin of the realm. I wanted the coin, too. I just wanted it in a way my father could not see as anything but trouble. The summer I was 13, he took us aboard a moored carrier during a family day. The kind of open ship event where dependents walk the hangar bay and eat hot dogs and pretend to understand what they are looking at. My mother, Eileen, held my hand on the ladders. Dennis ran ahead, and my father walked us up onto the flight deck itself, into the wind and the enormous flat gray expanse of it. And for one moment I felt the size of the thing he loved, the way the deck seemed to stretch out past the edge of the world. I stepped toward the foul line, the painted boundary that marks where the landing area begins. I did not even know it was a boundary. I just wanted to see. My father caught my shoulder and pulled me back. Hard, the way you pull a child back from a street. "Get back, Mari," he said. "This is no place for a girl. He did not say it to be cruel. I know that now. I did not know it then. I only knew that the biggest, most magnificent place I had ever stood was a place I had just been told I did not belong, by the one man whose opinion built the architecture of my whole small world. I did not argue. I was not an arguing kind of child. I filed it away instead, the way you file away a splinter you cannot reach, and I let it work its way deeper for years. At dinner, he would talk about the deck and then look at my report card and call my ambitions office work. He did not mean it as an insult. To him, the world divided cleanly into the people who stood on the deck and the people who pushed paper about the people who stood on the deck, and he had decided, with love, that I would be the second kind. Safer, drier, alive. I remember the exact night I decided otherwise. I was 15. There was a news segment on the television, footage of an F/A-18 coming aboard a carrier at dusk, the hook reaching down for the wire, the whole airframe slamming onto the deck and stopping in the space of a held breath. The camera was somewhere up on the island looking down, and I could see the tiny figures of the deck crew in their colored jerseys, and I could see the pilot's helmet in the cockpit. And I understood, all at once, that a person was inside that machine. A person had just done that. A person had ridden a controlled fall onto a steel field in the dark and walked away. My father was in his chair. He watched the same footage I did. He said, "Crazy way to make a living," and went back to his coffee. I said nothing, but I memorized the shape of the thing. I memorized the descent and the catch and the stop. I told no one, least of all him, that I had just decided what I was going to be. You do not announce a thing like that in a house built on the certainty that you cannot have it. You just start walking toward it, quietly, and you do not look back to see if anyone is watching, because you already know that the one person you want to be watching has turned to his coffee and away. He told me to be careful. He told me the deck does not forgive. He meant, I love you, stay alive. I heard, you will never stand here. For most of my life, those were the same sentence. It took me until I was 50 years old, standing on a flight deck in a float coat with a star on my collar, to finally hear the difference. It was the summer of 1994 when I left for the Naval Academy, and it was the same summer my father retired, and I have always believed those two facts were connected in some way neither of us would ever say out loud. He had spent 30 years keeping the deck. I was 18, and about to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. We passed each other going opposite directions through the same door, and neither of us knew how to say what that meant, so we said nothing, and he drove me to the gate, and that was the start of the long quiet that I am, even now only learning how to end. He drove me to induction day in a car that smelled like his aftershave and old coffee. The whole way there, I waited for him to say something that started with the word proud. He talked about traffic, he talked about the route. When we reached the gate, he put the car in park and looked straight ahead through the windshield, not at me, and he said, "It'll chew you up, Mari. There's no shame in coming home." And then he reached across me and opened my door, which was the most tender thing he knew how to do, and I got out, and I did not cry until he was gone. In my pocket, where he could not see it, was his boatswain's pipe, a small brass whistle on a lanyard, worn smooth from 30 years of use, the thing a boatswain's mate uses to pipe the side, to pass the word, to call the watch. I had taken it from his sea bag the night before without asking. I told myself I was only borrowing it. I think, really, I was taking the one piece of the deck he would never knowingly give me, so that I would always have a piece of it in my hand. I carried it through plebe summer. I carried it through 4 years on the Severn. I have carried it, in one pocket or another, for more than 30 years. The academy saw me clearly in a way my father never let himself. The institution did not care whose daughter I was, or what my father believed about girls and decks. It cared whether I could do the work. I could do the work. I learned celestial navigation and thermodynamics and how to lead 17-year-olds who were more frightened than I was. I requested aviation. I got it. Flight school in Pensacola was the happiest fear of my life. They strap you into a machine and ask you to do impossible things, and then they ask you to do them faster. And either the thing in you that wants the deck is stronger than the thing in you that wants to live, or it is not, and you find out which very quickly. Mine was stronger. It had been stronger since I was 15, and a man in a chair called it a crazy way to make a living. I earned my wings of gold in the year 2000. They pin them on at a ceremony, the wings of a naval aviator, and a family member traditionally does the pinning. My mother flew out alone. My father did not come. He sent word through her that a man does not need to watch a thing to know it happened, which was the kind of sentence that sounded like wisdom and felt like a closed door. I pinned on the wings of gold in front of an empty chair where my father should have been, and my mother cried, and I smiled for the photographs. And that night in the hotel, I took out the brass pipe and held it and told it, since I could not tell him, that I had done it anyway. 2 years later, I was a lieutenant junior grade on my first carrier deployment, and one night in the middle of an ocean, my father would have recognized. I brought an F/A-18 aboard for the first time at night. I caught the 3-wire. I rode the controlled fall onto the steel field in the dark and walked away, exactly as I had watched a stranger do when I was 15. I stood on the deck afterward in the red glow of the night lighting, shaking, alive, standing in the exact place I had been pulled back from, and I had never in my life felt so far from home and so completely arrived. I mailed him a photograph. Me, in my flight gear, beside the jet, the deck behind me. I wrote nothing on the back because I did not trust myself to keep it short. He never mentioned the photograph. My mother told me, years later, that he kept it in the drawer of his nightstand and that he looked at it more than he looked at almost anything. But that is the kind of thing you only find out long after it could have helped. Dennis called me during that deployment. We talked for a while about nothing, and then he said the thing the family had decided to believe, which was that Dad just worried, that all the flying was a kind of showing off, that I was making a point instead of a career. I did not argue with Dennis either. I was beginning to understand that my family had written a story about me and that no amount of altitude was going to revise it. So I stopped trying to revise it. I flew instead. I kept waiting for the sentence that started with the word proud, and I learned, somewhere over the years and the oceans, to stop waiting and just fly. The years stacked up the way they do. Lieutenant, lieutenant commander, the schools, the staff tours, the deployments that ran together. Commander, and with it command of a squadron, my name on the door, young aviators looking at me the way I had once looked at a stranger's helmet on a television screen. Captain, and the deep responsibilities that come with that rank in the Navy, where a captain is not a young company officer, but a person trusted with a ship or an air wing and the lives stacked inside it. And then, when I was 48, the call that I had been selected for Rear Admiral, the lower half, 1 star. Flag rank, the thing my father had quietly bet his whole understanding of the world I would never reach. I called home when the flag list came out. My father said, "Huh?" Then he said, "They give you a desk for that." And I laughed because by then it did not cut the way it used to, and because he was not entirely wrong, and because under the gruffness I thought I heard something move, the way ice moves on a river before it breaks. I did not push it. You do not push a thing like that. You let it move on its own time, and you go back to work, and you wait, the way I had been waiting my whole life, for the river to finally break. It broke on a flight deck on the morning I took command of an entire strike group in the voice of a 23-year-old sailor who had no idea who I was. The morning I was to assume command of Carrier Strike Group 12, I flew out to the flagship by Q'd, the carrier onboard delivery aircraft, the workhorse C-2. Greyhound that hauls people and parts and mail across the open ocean to a ship that never stops moving. They strap you into a seat facing backward, and you sit in the dark and the noise, and then the aircraft slams onto the deck, and the arresting wire stops you so fast that the straps bite into your shoulders, and your stomach arrives a half second after the rest of you. It is the most violent welcome in the world. I have loved it every single time. I was early on purpose. The change of command ceremony was not for hours. The ship knew an admiral was inbound, but the specific timing of a QOD is a loose thing, weather and traffic and the rhythm of flight operations, and I had asked my staff quietly not to make a parade of my arrival on the deck itself. I wanted 10 minutes. I wanted to stand on the flight deck of the ship that would be my flagship before the rituals started, before the side boys and the bell and the reading of orders, before I became the admiral and stopped being the girl who got pulled back from the foul line. I wanted 10 minutes alone with the deck. So I came off the cod in a cranial, the padded flight deck helmet with its goggles and its sound attenuators, and a float coat, the bulky flotation vest every soul on a flight deck wears, and in all of that gear, with my face half hidden and no rank visible anywhere on me, I was not a rear admiral. I was a shape. I was one more body in a sea of bodies on the most dangerous 4.5 acres in the world, and the people whose job it is to keep that deck safe did not know me from a contractor or a congressman or a lost mechanic. The deck was alive. They were recovering aircraft. There is no place on Earth like a carrier flight deck during flight operations. The noise past the edge of what a body can hold, the jet blast that can throw a man off the deck, the props and the intakes and the wires, the colored jerseys moving in patterns that look like chaos and are, in fact, the most rehearsed choreography human beings perform. Yellow shirts directing aircraft, blue shirts chalking and chaining, purple shirts fueling, green, white, red, brown, each color a trade, each person a link in a chain where one weak link kills people. I drifted. That is the honest word for it. I knew better, and I drifted anyway, because the deck had its hand on the back of my neck the way it had when I was 13, and I let myself walk a few steps toward the landing area to watch an F/A-18 turn onto its final approach. The same descent and catch and stop I had memorized in a living room 35 years before. I was closer to the foul line than I had any business being. And a young man in a yellow jersey and a float coat and a cranial of his own, a sailor whose entire job in that moment was to make sure no unidentified person wandered into the landing area while a fighter came aboard, saw me. He did not see a rear admiral. He saw a problem. He saw exactly the thing he was standing there to prevent. He came at me fast, both arms up, herding me back toward the catwalk at the deck edge, and over the scream of the approaching jet, he shouted the words at the top of his lungs. "Get off the flight deck, lady. This is no place for a civilian." I have commanded thousands of people. I have given orders that sent aircraft into harm and brought them home. I have been called every rank I ever wore, and a few I had not earned yet. And a 23-year-old petty officer in a yellow jersey looked at me and said the sentence my father said to me on a moored carrier when I was 13 years old, almost word for word, and for one full second I was not an admiral at all. I was a girl being pulled back from the only place she ever wanted to stand. I did not argue. This is the part I need you to understand, because it is the whole of who the deck made me. I did not pull rank. I did not draw myself up and tell that boy who I was. He was right. That is the thing. He was completely, exactly right. There was a fighter on final approach and an unidentified person near the foul line, and his job, the job that keeps people alive on a flight deck, is to clear that person without hesitation and without apology. And he had done it perfectly. So I stepped back toward the catwalk the way he was telling me to, my eyes still on him, and I let him do his job. And behind me, the F/A-18 slammed onto the deck and caught the wire, and the noise rolled over both of us like weather. He held his position until the aircraft was down and clear. Good. He was watching me too now. Something working behind his goggles, a flicker of doubt, because civilians do not usually step back that calmly. Civilians flinch and argue and freeze, and I had done none of those things. I had moved like someone who had been on a deck before. He could not place it. He held his ground, and so did I, the two of us at the deck edge with the recovered jet taxiing past, and I watched him try to solve a problem he did not yet know the size of. The recovery cycle reached a pause, and into that pause, from the speakers mounted on the island, the most ordinary and most enormous sound in the Navy. The crackle of the one main circuit, the high, clear notes of a boatswain's pipe, the same sound my father's brass whistle makes, the sound I had carried in my pocket for 30 years. And then the bell, struck in pairs, and then the words that the whole ship had been waiting to hear and that this one young sailor had not connected to the figure he was herding off his deck. Carrier Strike Group 12, arriving. That is how the Navy announces a flag officer coming aboard to take command. Not by name, by the command itself, because the command and the person have become, in that moment, the same thing. Up on the island, my one-star flag broke open in the wind, blue with a single white star, and snapped taut. The captain of the carrier, Captain Reuben Vance, had come down to the deck to meet his Kiad, looking for his admiral, and he found her standing at the deck edge in a borrowed-looking float coat, being shooed off his flight deck by one of his own aircraft handlers. I watched it land on Vance's face, the recognition, and I watched him come to attention. Beside him, the air boss, Commander Doreen Falk, came to attention too, and the wind, which never stops on a flight deck, caught the open front of my float coat and pulled it aside. And on the collar of the uniform underneath, the young sailor in the yellow jersey saw the single silver star. His name, I would learn within the hour, was Petty Officer Jesse Marsh. He was 23 years old, and he went absolutely still, the color draining out of what I could see of his face, his arms still half raised from hurting me, as he understood that the civilian he had just ordered off the flight deck was the admiral whose flag was at that second snapping open above his head, the officer about to assume command of every ship on the horizon. He said it the way my father used to say it. And for 1 second, I was 13 again, being pulled back from the only place I ever wanted to stand. The difference, the whole difference, was that this time I did not stay back. This time, the deck was mine. "Ma'am," Marsh got out, his voice cracking under the helmet. "Ma'am, I didn't know it was you." Captain Vance crossed the deck toward me with the careful speed of a man who wants to fix a thing before it becomes a story. "Admiral Holt," he said, and saluted. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. I apologize. The petty officer didn't." I returned the salute and stopped him there, because I already knew, standing on that steel with the wind off the water and my father's whistle still echoing in my ears from the one main circuit, exactly what I was going to do. And it was not what everyone braced around me expected. I did not let it become a punishment. That mattered to me more than I can easily explain, and the people around me did not understand it at first, so let me try to explain it to you the way I eventually explained it to my command master chief in a steel passageway 1 deck down from the noise. His name was Master Chief Lamar Pitts, and he was 55 years old, and he had spent his whole life on decks, and he was, I realized the moment I met him, the closest thing to my father I had stood beside in 30 years. Same build, same economy of words, same way of looking at the deck like it was a living thing that could turn on you. He had seen the whole exchange from the island, and when I came down off the deck and pulled off the cranial and shook out my hair, he was waiting, and there was a careful anger in him on my behalf. "Ma'am," Pitts said, "I'll have a word with that sailor." "You will not," I said. He looked at me. Command Master Chiefs are not in the habit of being told no by admirals they met 4 minutes ago, but they are very much in the habit of reading people fast, and he read me. "He did his job," I said. There was an aircraft on final and an unidentified person near the foul line, and he cleared the deck without hesitating. That is exactly what I want every one of those kids to do. If I put a boot on his neck for it, the next one hesitates. The next one looks to see who it is before he acts, and the next one gets somebody killed. I shook my head. He was right, Master Chief. I was the one who drifted. 50 years old, and I drifted toward the foul line like a tourist because I wanted to watch a trap. He had every reason to yell at me. Pitts studied me for a long moment, and then something in his face eased, and he almost smiled. "Your file says you came up flying," he said. "It doesn't say you came up around the deck." "My father was a boatswain's mate," I said. "Master Chief, 30 years. Pitts nodded slowly, and the whole conversation changed in that nod, the way it does between two people who suddenly recognize that they were raised by the same kind of man. "That explains the step back," he said. "Civilians don't step back like that." "No," I said, "they don't." Before he turned to go, Pitts said one more thing, and he said it carefully, the way the senior enlisted speak truth to the officers they have decided are worth the trouble. "For what it's worth, ma'am, the deck already likes you. Word travels fast up here. By chow tonight, every sailor on this ship is going to know the new admiral got told to clear the foul line and said the kid was right. You can't buy that kind of start. You couldn't have planned it if you tried." He almost smiled again. "Your father did you a favor raising you around the deck, even if he didn't mean it as a favor at the time." That landed harder than he knew. I had spent 37 years believing my father had done me a disservice, that his refusal to bless the deck had been a weight I carried. Pitts, who had never met the man, had just reframed it as a gift. Both things were true. That is the part nobody tells you about the people who raise you. The same act can be a wound and an inheritance at once, and you do not get to keep only the inheritance. He let me go after that, and I went up to the flag cabin, the small steel stateroom that would be mine for as long as I held the command. And for the first time since the Kiad slammed onto the deck, I was alone. I sat on the edge of the rack, and I took the brass pipe out of my pocket, my father's pipe, the one I took from his sea bag the night before I left for the academy, and I turned it over in my hands the way he used to turn over a good knot under the porch light. I thought about how strange it is that a sentence can wait 37 years to be finished. My father said, "This is no place for a girl," on a moored carrier when I was 13. A stranger said, "This is no place for a civilian," on my own flagship when I was 50. The same shape of words, the same gust of being told to get back. And between those two sentences, I had built an entire life out of refusing to get back. And here was the thing I had not expected to feel. I was not angry at the boy on the deck. I was grateful to him. Because he had handed me, without knowing it, the exact moment I had been walking toward since I was 15 years old in front of a television. He had pulled me back from the foul line, and then the Navy had announced, over the one main circuit, in front of him and the captain and the air boss and God and everybody, that the foul line and the deck and the ship and the whole strike group were now mine. My flag aide, Lieutenant Commander Priya Anand, knocked and came in with the program for the change of command, the sequence of events, the remarks I was scheduled to give. Anand was 34, sharp, organized, the kind of officer who has read the room before she enters it. She had heard about the deck, of course. By then, the whole ship had heard about the deck. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "the public affairs officer wanted me to ask whether you'd like us to, address the incident on the deck, get ahead of it." "There's nothing to get ahead of," I said. "A sailor did his job. Tell the public affairs officer to find something else to worry about." She made a note, then she hesitated, the way good aides do when they are about to do their actual job, which is to tell the boss the thing the boss might not want to hear. "There's a line in your remarks," she said, "about command being a privilege earned over a career. It's a good line." She paused. "After this morning, you might have a better one." I looked at her. She was right. I crossed the line out with the pen she handed me, and I did not yet know what I was going to say in its place. But I knew it was going to be about a 23-year-old in a yellow jersey who had more sense about the deck than the Admiral did. And I knew it was going to be about my father, who had been trying for 50 years to keep me off the deck and had only ever managed to make me want it more. That was the moment I decided two things. The first was that I was going to find Petty Officer Marsh, not to discipline him and not to forgive him, because there was nothing to forgive, but to close a loop in him that no one had ever closed in me. The second was harder. The second was that I was going to call my father and ask him, out loud, in plain words, to come to the change of command and watch me take the deck. I had given orders to thousands of people that week. The hardest sentence I said was the one I said into a telephone the next evening, to a 78-year-old man in a small house near a naval station. 3 words long: "Dad, come aboard." My first full day in command, I held an all-hands call in the hangar bay, the cavernous space below the flight deck where the aircraft are maintained, and where, with the bay doors open to the sea, you can fit a remarkable number of sailors. They stood in their coveralls and their dungarees, hundreds of them young, most of them younger than my career. And I looked out at them, and I told them a version of what had happened on the deck. I did not name Marsh. I did not describe a lady being shooed off the deck. I told them that the day before, a sailor doing his job had cleared an unidentified person away from the landing area during a recovery without hesitating, without checking who it was, without waiting for permission, and that this, exactly this, was the thing I valued above almost everything else on the ship. I told them the deck does not care about your rank when a jet is on final. I told them that the people who keep the deck safe are the real owners of it, and that I would always back the sailor who acted to keep someone alive, even if the someone was me. The hangar bay was very quiet. I could see a few of them working it out, the ones who had heard the story, glancing at each other. And somewhere in the back, though I could not see him, I knew Petty Officer Marsh was standing there hearing his admiral tell 600 people that he had done the right thing. It was not universally popular up the chain. That same afternoon, a staff officer, a perfectly competent commander who had come with the strike group staff, suggested in a meeting that the deck incident, as he called it, ought to be documented, that there was a question of an admiral's dignity, that it looked bad. I let him finish. Then I told him that an admiral's dignity was not a fragile thing that a 23-year-old could break by doing his duty, and that if my dignity could not survive being correctly told to clear a foul line, then I had no business wearing the star. I told him the matter was closed. It stayed closed. Holding that boundary was easy. The hard boundary was the one I had to hold against my own family, and that one I held with my voice shaking. I called the house in the evening. Ship's time bent around the distance the way it always is. My mother answered, the way she always does, and we talked for a few minutes, and then I asked for my father, and there was the small pause that has lived in my family for 50 years, and then he came on. Mari, he said. Dad. I had practiced this, and it still came out rough. The change of command is in a few days. I want you here. I want you and Mom to come aboard and watch it. There was a silence long enough that I checked the connection. Then he said, a ship's no place for an old man now. I'd just be in the way. And there it was, the same architecture, the same certainty about who belongs on a deck and who does not, except this time it was pointed at himself. He had spent 30 years owning that deck, and now he believed he had no right to stand on it as a guest. I understood suddenly that my father's whole theory of the deck had never really been about me. It had been about belonging and about the terror of not belonging. And he had been managing that terror his whole life, by deciding very firmly who was allowed and who was not. You wouldn't be in the way, I said. You'd be my guest, the master chief who taught me to tie a bowline, watching his daughter take command of a strike group. There is no one on this earth who has more right to stand on that deck than you. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no again either. And then my mother took the phone, gently, the way she takes things out of his hands when his hands are full, and she said, We'll be there, Mari. Both of us. I'll see to it. Dennis was there too, on the line, and he could not quite let the moment be what it was. A desk with a view, he said, lightly, the old joke, the family story about my office work. Look at you, Marie. Big chair. I let it pass. You learn to let it pass. But I noticed that the joke had less air in it than it used to, and I wondered whether even Dennis was starting to suspect that the story the family had written about me did not have room for the thing that was actually happening. I hung up the phone in the steel quiet of the flag cabin, and I did not know, truly did not know, whether my father would actually walk up the brow. He had not come to my winging. He had skipped the moment I became a naval aviator. There was no rule of the universe that said he would not skip this one too. I sat with the brass pipe in my hand, and I let myself want it anyway, the way I had been wanting it since I was 13, and I went to find a 23-year-old sailor instead, because that was a loop I actually knew how to close. I found Petty Officer Marsh on the flight deck 2 days later, during a lull in operations, the deck briefly quiet, the aircraft chained down, the crew doing the endless maintenance that fills the spaces between launches. Master Chief Pitts had told me where he would be. I went up without an entourage, just me, in my working uniform with the star on the collar that he had seen in the wind. He saw me coming and he braced. You could see him deciding it had finally arrived, the punishment, the price, the thing he had been waiting 2 days for. He came to attention so hard I thought he might injure himself. At ease, Petty Officer, I said. He did not go to ease. They never do, the first time an admiral tells them to. Marsh, is it? Jesse Marsh? Yes, ma'am. His jaw was tight. Ma'am, I want to apologize. I had no idea. I didn't come up here for an apology, I said. I came up here because I want you to walk me through your job. He blinked. It was not what he had braced for. Ma'am, your job, I said. On the deck, walk me through it, the jerseys, the signals, the foul line. I flew off decks for 20 years, Marsh, but I flew off them. I never kept one. You keep one, so teach me. And slowly, haltingly, then with growing confidence as he realized I actually meant it, he taught me. He pointed out the yellow shirts, the aircraft directors, his own trade. He showed me the blue shirts who chalk and chain, the purple shirts who fuel, the brown, the green, the red, the white, the whole colored choreography of the most dangerous workplace in the world. He showed me the foul lines, the painted boundaries that mean the difference between a clear deck and a fouled one, between a safe recovery and a catastrophe. He showed me, without realizing he was doing it, exactly why he had been right to shout at me. When he finished, he stood there, and I could see him waiting again because the lesson was over, and surely now the other thing would come. A sailor taught me something a long time ago, I said. He told me the deck does not forgive. He told me to get back from the foul line because it was no place for me. He was a Master Chief boatswain's mate. He was my father. Marsh's eyes widened slightly. He spent 30 years keeping a deck like this one, and the day you yelled at me, you sounded exactly like him. And do you know what I realized, Petty Officer Marsh? I realized he was never trying to keep me off the deck. He was trying to keep me alive on it, the way you were. The people who keep the deck safe are the people who own it. That is you, not me. You. Do not ever let anyone, not a contractor, not a congressman, not an admiral, drift across your foul line without hearing about it. Are we clear? Clear, ma'am, he said, and his voice was not cracking now. And he was standing differently, taller, the way a person stands when something has been set right in them that they did not know was crooked. I asked him before I left where he was from, and he told me a small town I had never heard of. And he told me his father drove a delivery route and his mother taught grade school, and that he had joined the Navy because the recruiter was the only person who had ever told him he could be part of something that mattered. I told him that the recruiter had been right and that the deck he kept safe was about as much as the thing matters in this world. He stood there, with that, turning it over, a boy who had been told his whole life that he was ordinary, discovering that an admiral did not see him that way. I recognized the look. I had worn it once in front of a Master Chief who turned a bowline up to the porch light and did not smile. We are all, every one of us, just waiting for one person with authority over our hearts to tell us that we belong. I had spent 50 years waiting for mine. I was not going to make this boy wait a day longer than he had to for his. Ashore, I learned much later, my father was standing in front of a closet, holding a set of dress blues he had not worn in decades, trying to decide whether he had the right. My mother told me about it the way she tells me everything, slowly, over time, in the gaps between other conversations. He had taken the uniform out and laid it on the bed. He had brushed it. And then he had stood there, my mother said, for the better part of an hour, holding the jacket and not putting it on, because a retired Master Chief does not wear his uniform to be a guest, and my father could not figure out how to be a guest on a deck. You should tell her, my mother told him, that she's been carrying your pipe for 30 years. My father did not know about the pipe. He had noticed decades before that it was gone from his sea bag, and he had assumed it lost, and he had grieved it quietly the way a man grieves a tool that was part of his hand for 30 years. And he had never once imagined that his daughter had taken it, that she had carried it through plebe, summer, and flight school, and every deployment and every command, that the piece of the deck he thought he had lost had been in her pocket the whole time, going everywhere he believed she should not go. When my mother told him, he sat down. He sat down the way older men sit down when their legs make the decision for them. And he said, my mother told me, the truest thing he had said in 50 years. I never thought she'd really do it, he said. I told her to stay off the deck because I watched the deck take better men than me. I lost friends out there, Eileen. I held the line so they could land, and I watched some of them not. And then I had a daughter who wanted to ride a jet onto the wires in the dark, and I could not stand the thought of it, so I told her she couldn't. I told her she didn't belong, because if she didn't belong, then she'd be safe. He looked at the dress blues on the bed. I never let myself believe she'd really do it. And she did it anyway. She did all of it anyway. And I missed it. I missed her whole life telling her to get back. I thought he doubted me. He had been trying badly in the only language he had, to keep me alive. There is a particular grief in learning, at 50, that the wall you spent your whole life climbing was built by someone who loved you and was afraid for you, and that the love and the fear were so tangled together that even he could not tell them apart. I do not know that it would have helped to know it sooner, but I know it helped to know it at all. They came aboard the morning of the change of command. My mother first, in a good dress, gripping the rail of the brow, the ramp that connects the pier to the ship, her face bright with the particular joy of a woman who has waited a long time to be proud out loud. And behind her, slowly, one hand on the rail, came my father in his dress blues. He had worn them after all. He stopped at the top of the brow. There is a tradition there, a salute to the ensign, a salute to the officer of the deck, a request for permission to come aboard. And my father, who had rendered those honors 10,000 times in his life, stood at the top of the brow and could not move, because he was not crossing onto a deck as a Master Chief. He was crossing onto it as the father of the admiral, and the size of that undid him for a moment. I was waiting for him. I had told the officer of the deck I would receive my own father, and I stood there in my whites with the single star, and I watched the man who taught me to tie a bowline stand, frozen at the top of the brow, 78 years old, in a uniform that no longer quite fit, holding on to the rail. I went to him. quietly, the way you approach a thing that might startle. "Permission to come aboard, Master Chief," I said, which was not how it is supposed to go. The Admiral does not prompt the guest, but I said it anyway, and something in him caught the rope I had thrown. "Permission," he started, and his voice broke, and he tried again. "Requesting permission to come aboard, ma'am." And he saluted, and I returned it, and my father stepped onto the deck. I took him out of the flow of arriving guests to a quiet stretch of the flight deck near the island, before the chairs and the bunting and the ceremony swallowed everything. And I took the brass pipe out of my pocket. His pipe, 30 years of his hand worn into the brass, and then 30 years of mine. I put it in his palm. He looked at it, and he knew it instantly, the way you know a thing that was part of your body, and his face did something I had never seen it do. "You kept it," he said. "All this time." "I took it from your sea bag the night before I left for the academy," I said. "I'm sorry, I needed a piece of the deck you weren't going to give me." I closed his fingers around it. "Keep it. I want you to have it back." "I have my own deck now." He could not speak. He stood there with the pipe in his fist, this hard old man who had spent a lifetime not saying the word proud. And I walked him to the foul line, the same painted boundary, in spirit, that he had pulled me back from when I was 13, the line that marks where the landing area begins, the line a stranger had shouted at me to retreat behind only days before. We stood at it together, and this time neither of us stepped back. "There is a young man you should meet," I told him, and I called Petty Officer Marsh over, and I watched two deck sailors separated by 60 years recognize each other. My father looked at Marsh's rate, at the way he carried himself, and he knew exactly what the boy did. "Yellow shirt," my father said. "Aircraft director." "Yes, Master Chief," Marsh said, because Pitts had told him who the old man in the dress blues was. "He cleared an unidentified person off his foul line during a recovery," I said, without hesitating, without checking who it was. I let that sit. "It was me, Dad. He's the one who told me to get off the flight deck." My father looked at Marsh for a long moment, and then he did the thing I had waited my whole life to see him do for me. And he did it for a 23-year-old stranger, which was somehow exactly right. He nodded once, and held the boy's eye, and said, "You did good, son. You did exactly right." And Marsh stood there, between the old Master Chief and the new Admiral, 2 generations of the deck. And you could see the moment land on him as something he would carry for the rest of his life. The ceremony itself is a precise and beautiful thing, and I will not walk you through all of it. But I will tell you what mattered. They held it on the flight deck. Rows of white chairs, the bunting, the side boys, the band, the deck I had drifted across as an anonymous shape in a float coat, now full of dress uniforms, and family and the whole crew in ranks. I will tell you that I did not sleep much the night before. I sat in the flag cabin with the brass pipe, and I thought about the long road of it, the empty chair at my winging, the photograph in a nightstand drawer that I did not know about for years, the thousands of nights at sea, the friends I had lost the way my father lost his, the slow accumulation of a career that the people who loved me had never quite been able to see. A change of command is a strange ceremony. It looks like a beginning, but it is really a kind of accounting, a public reckoning of everything that brought you to the moment you are trusted with other people's lives. I lay awake and I did the accounting, and somewhere in the small hours I made my peace with the fact that my father might not come. And I decided that I would take the command anyway, gladly, because the command was mine whether or not he was there to see it. That, I think, was the real change. I had spent my whole life taking the deck to prove something to him. That night I let go of the proving, and the deck was still mine, and it was lighter to hold. My orders were read aloud. The formal language, the directive from the Navy that I was to assume command, the words that transfer the authority of an entire strike group from one human being to another. The outgoing commander said his piece. And then it was done in the way the Navy does it, cleanly, with a salute and a sentence. And I was the commander of Carrier Strike Group 12, standing under my own flag on the deck of my own flagship. I looked out at the faces in the chairs. My mother was weeping openly and not caring who saw. My brother Dennis was sitting very still, and there was nothing left of the joke in his face, none of the desk with a view, just a man watching his little sister take a flag command, and understanding finally that the story the family had told about me had been wrong the whole time, and my father sat in his dress blues with the brass pipe in his breast pocket, his back as straight as 78 years would allow, and he was looking at me the way I had wanted him to look at me since I was a girl at a kitchen table. When it was my turn to speak, I did not give the line about command being a privilege earned over a career. I had crossed it out days before with Annan's pen. Instead, I told them about the deck. I told them, briefly, that the most dangerous 4.5 acres in the world are kept safe not by admirals, but by teenagers in colored jerseys, that the real owners of a flight deck are the sailors who will shout an admiral off of it without blinking when there is an aircraft on final, and that I had been reminded of this, recently and personally, by a petty officer who had more sense about the deck than I had shown that morning. I did not tell the whole story. I did not have to. Marsh was in the ranks, standing the way I had taught him, and he knew. My father knew. That was enough. I had the command. I had the star. As the ceremony ended and the flag flew and the crowd began to rise and mill and find each other, I looked again at my father, and the old question rose in me one more time, the question I had carried for 50 years. I had the command, and I had the star, and I still did not know, even now, even here, whether I finally had him. He found me at dusk. The ceremony was long over. The guests had gone ashore or below. The chairs were being struck. The deck was returning to what it is when the rituals end, which is a working place, quiet for the moment, the jets chained down, the light going gold and then gray out over the water. I was at the deck edge near the foul line, where I keep ending up, when my father came across the deck toward me, slowly, one hand out for balance against the gentle movement of the ship. He stood beside me. For a while he did not say anything, and neither did I, because we are not, either of us, people who fill a silence for the sake of filling it. We watched the light go down over the water the way he must have watched it go down 10,000 times in 30 years. "This is no place for a girl," he said. I turned to look at him. He was not looking at me. He was looking out at the water, at the deck, at the whole enormous fact of where we were standing. "You used to say that," I said. "I did." He nodded slowly. He took a long breath, the kind that costs an old man something. "I was wrong, Mari." He let that stand for a moment, the largest thing he had ever given me, and then he gave me the rest of it. "It was no place for a girl. It turned out to be exactly the place for you." He turned, finally, and looked at me, his eyes wet and steady. "I should have told you that 35 years ago. I should have driven you to that gate and told you to go get it. I was afraid. I let you think I didn't believe in you, and the truth is, I never believed in anything more in my life. I just couldn't stand the thought of losing you to the thing I loved." He swallowed. "I'm proud of you. I have been proud of you every single day. I'm sorry it took me until I was an old man on your deck to say it." I had waited my whole life for a sentence that started with the word proud. It turned out to be worth the wait. I am not going to pretend to you that it healed everything, because that is not how people work, and a single sentence at dusk does not erase 50 years of silence. But it did the thing that matters. It let the silence finally be over. It let us both put it down. I found Marsh before he went off watch, and I told him I had put a note in his record, a good one, a formal recognition for sound judgment under pressure, for acting decisively to keep the flight deck safe. He started to say he did not deserve it, and I told him that was exactly why he did. The boy who shooed an admiral off the flight deck walked off it that evening standing a full inch taller than the boy who had braced for punishment 2 days before. And I thought, that is a thing I did right. Of all the orders I gave that week, that quiet note in a young sailor's record may be the one that lasts the longest. And then it was just the two of us again, my father and me, at the foul line as the last of the light went out of the sky. He had the brass pipe in his pocket. I had the star on my collar. The deck was under both of us. The deck he gave his life to, and the deck I had spent my whole life earning, and the wind came off the water the way it never stops doing. And nobody on that whole ship was telling either of us to get back. If you have spent your life waiting for one person to finally see you, I hope you get your moment on the deck. I hope the words come, even if they come late, even if they come from someone who took 50 years to find them. And if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of the thing you were told you could not have, with the wind in your face and your whole life behind you and someone, somewhere, finally watching you the right way, I hope you do not step back. Stand there. Hold your ground. You earned it. You always did. Standing at that foul line with my father, the star on my collar, and his old brass pipe back in his pocket, I understood that the deck was never really what we were fighting about. It was about whether he could let himself believe in me, and whether I could stop needing him to. If you made it to the end of this story, I would love to hear from you. Was there someone in your life whose approval you chased for years? Did you ever finally get the words you were waiting for, or did you have to learn to give them to yourself? And have you ever done the right thing, the way that young sailor did, even when it scared you? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and stay a while.